Okay, thank you very much. Our next presentation is going to be Louis Decimus Rubin Jr., A History of Algonquin Books from Personal Correspondence by Shannon Ravenel. This paper received the third place student award from the same history division.
You went? Okay. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to be able to say about this paper, which is about Louis Decimus Rubin Jr., is important because to people in this room, because it took me 3.5 years and 2 journalism history professors to guide me in this research. History research, particularly working in archive, takes a long time. So I want to thank these 2 people. The first person I took from was Dr. Kathy Roberts Ford in 2013, where this idea originated. And then I finally executed this paper with Dr. Campbell's help just this past spring. So thank you, Dr. Campbell and Dr. Ford. Most people, when I ask them, they say, well, who is Louis Rubin? And why does he matter? Particularly in journalism or journalism history, right? And that's always been the question. Who is this guy? I've never heard of him. So there's at least a picture of him, and this is in his study at home in Chapel Hill. And there's a framed picture of the Algonquin steamship behind him, which is where he got the inspiration to name this publishing house he started. But the reason, several reasons he's important to journalism and journalism history, as well as a variety of things, are first of all and foremost, he's a journalist. And I list some of the organizations he worked for many years as a journalist and as also a news editor. Then later he went to Johns Hopkins and he became a literary scholar. And one of the things he did that was different there at Johns Hopkins was he said, you know, there's this group of literature called Southern literature, and it's important and it's worthy of study. And at that time, the faculty there really didn't agree to that, but he is known for establishing Southern literature as a category worthy of study in American literature. So that's one thing he did. He first became an English professor and chair of a creative writing program at Collins College from 1957 to 67. And later, UNC Chapel Hill recruited him to become an English professor there. And the time period I'm focused on for this particular research, although I've read a lot about him and around him, is he also is an author. But this particular time in 1982 to 1989, where he founded a book publishing house, and how this contributes to, it's an area of journalism history called book history. So the first thing I did is, it turns out that Louis Rubin donated his documents, all his correspondence, to the Southern Historical Collection at UNC Chapel Hill in the Wilson Library. And he did most of this prior to his death, where he cataloged most of his own research, correspondence, and whatnot. The stipulations there that I learned about this under Dr. Ford were, I could not access any of this information until 1 year after his death. Well, he died after I took Dr. Ford's class on November 16th, 2013. So then I had to wait a year, remember? So in the summer I spent 2 weeks going through a lot of his files in Chapel Hill. And I stayed there. And again, this paper focused on just that one contribution, which was the Algonquin book period. However, I did, while I was there, discuss a future potential book with UNC Press. So this particular research, in terms of theoretical base, it focuses on a model established by Robert Darnton, who is a book historian, which pretty much puts forth a blueprint for studying journalism history, well, book history within journalism history, and the author, publishers, and this kind of stuff. So this is rooted in a history of book publishing in the United States. A key figure in his life is a woman named Julia Randall. She was an award-winning American poet. She also got her master's at Johns Hopkins, where she met Louis Rubin, and she taught English. He recruited her to teach there from 1962 to 73. But the reason this is important is, as I went to read Rubin's correspondence, I found this woman's name pop up over and over again, and it turned out that he corresponded with her throughout her entire lifetime. They were best friends, and they talked a lot about literature, everything that was going on in their lives, and they would visit each other. She died in 2005. They even discussed where they would both donate their letters and documents and creative works. But she chose to donate her correspondence and papers to Hollins University. So obviously, I go to Hollins University and read more about her. So I read both sides, yes? They're talking to each other about a variety of things. And one of them was also Shannon Ravenel's file. She was a former student of his. She later became the editor of the Best American Short Stories from 1977 to 1990. And she's a key player because Reuben calls her in 1982 and asked her to become editor of Algonquin Books and move to Chapel Hill. So these are just some samples. Again, I have 8 minutes, so I'm just going to show you a few things that I found. A letter, this is one piece. It really stems from an article Shannon Ravenel wrote, but she received a letter from him on New Year's Day saying, you know, I want you to think about something, not do anything about it yet, but in case I go ahead, you might have some ideas. I'm convinced that A, publishing literary fiction is dying in New York City, and B, it can be done. Even so, I am therefore toying with the idea of doing it myself. I don't mean regional, experimental, avant-garde stuff, but simply the best fiction and nonfiction I can locate. And another key figure is Annie Dillard, and that's because this was Reuben and Julia Randall's former student. She actually, while many of the authors claim that Reuben was a huge inspiration to them, Annie Dillard in particular adored Julia Randall Sawyer, okay? But while she was at Hollins, she wrote a book that won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction in 1975 called Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And she wrote this book while at Hollins, so of course she was taught by Reuben and Randall. So he's looking for money to found this book publishing house, so he contacts Annie Dillard in a letter. This is what the letter looked like. And he's basically asking her, he's thinking about calling it the Brightleaf Press, and he's telling her again they want to publish the best fiction, and we want to just bring out 4 or 6 books a season. And he's looking for people to join him and give him money. So I want to say I found that about $10,000 were solicited from many of his former students that have become famous or earned enough money to contribute to this venture of Algonquin Books that would focus more on publishing new Southern literature authors. If you've never heard of Algonquin Books, I do have a few titles here you may or may not be familiar with, particularly with Southern literature for the most part. The first one is Clyde Egerton's Rainey, which was also later made into a movie. Kay Gibbons was a student of his, and she wrote Ellen Foster. That also was eventually made into a movie and it won several awards. And they're also known for publishing Lee Smith, who's a famous North Carolina author. She teaches actually now at NC State. It's not profitable, however, so he writes to Julia Randall, look, we're running out of money. He thought he could make this thing go, but he can't, so he ends up selling it off. So he first sells it to Taylor Publishing in Dallas, and he still retains editorial control, despite the fact that they earned $500,000 in subsidiary rights during the previous 18 months. Again, he stays on. He remains senior editor. But later, he doesn't get along very well with this first arrangement with Taylor, and so he sells it to Workman Publishing Company in New York City, where it still sits. Today, Algonquin is no longer a small literary house that was notable for publishing new Southern writers, but has become really more of a general interest publication, and they only have a staff of 9 in Chapel Hill and 3 in New York City, and I think that may have even dwindled since I wrote this. And now they only publish 1 novel per year. They have to focus on nonfiction. But I really like this last line. Shannon Ravenel stayed on with it, but stepped down in 2000. She was given her own book imprint called Ravenel Books, and she continued to acquire 3 to 4 books a year. But when her contract ran out in 2005, she decided not to take on any new writers, and because clearly today she's 78 years old. And it's just nice to see a picture of some of these characters that are part of this on the slide. That's it.